The white would be lighter up here. Now right away you can see how the illusion is starting to develop. And that's what section 3 is all about. Now this cylinder here has some whiter areas in it, mostly where I think the light might hit it, which is going to be down here a little bit away from the fabric which is overhanging it. Now this cylinder, this ball up here, would probably be lighter up in here only. So now I go back to this one again. Now I'm going to define in here this plane break, which is very important, which is why I drew this cylinder first. Now you see how this cylinder is starting to show up because I know I already drew the shape that was under there, so I knew what it was. And it's very important that when you're working with things like that, that you define those breaks like that really clearly. Now you'll see I'm adding a few blacks in there. You see how I'm doing that? Also, it's helpful if you can draw with both hands. In other words, drawing backwards is helpful sometimes. You know, like if you're left-handed, draw with your right, and if you're right, you draw with your left. Especially when doing work like this, it's kind of helpful. There was another fold over here, I think, right there. So you see how the illusion, okay, I got one more, which is, and this is called modeling, okay, which is another definition, which is where you're making form by using highlights and middle tones and dark areas. The light source, of course, we just define that as being your single point of light, and we'll be using that throughout section 3. The last one is cast shadows. Now cast shadows we'll get into more in depth later on in this section, but for right now I'm going to just make up a cast shadow just to show you what it might look like. Now what I'm doing here is I'm duplicating what I think the light might do around these rounded forms of the fabric as they're casting their shadow onto this darker fabric down here. Now cast shadows can have sharp edges or muted edges depending on actually the focus of the light, because the light, you know, is just like any other kind of focal point or beam. And so you notice what I did here, and I have to clean these up a little bit. I made these shadows, which these cast shadows then give even more depth to the piece. You could add very small details, like maybe there'd be a little shadow under this ball, not much. You could actually go in a little further and put a little white on top of the black. And you see how this further enhances the illusion. But again, what I find that happens more often than not is that students will reach for this white or the black too soon. And if you do, you end up with too many whites in the blacks and too many blacks in the whites. You see how I just pulled that out just really quick like that? So it's really important that you divide up those areas very simply like I talked about right here. Okay, now I just have one more thing to show you, and that'll be it for this one. This is on a medium value piece of paper. Now medium value should take the place of this tone in here. If you have the opportunity to work with a better paper, you can notice this paper has a nice texture. I did the same drawing on there, and you'll see how it's very similar. But the texture of the paper shows up more. I did do a few tests right here. Again, here's the plastic, and here's my kneaded eraser. And they work a little differently on this type of paper. This is called Canson paper. Notice how it took that white right off of there. But you see with all the crumbs that come off of some of these, simply because this paper has a lot more tooth to it. And you learn tooth, you can see very obviously right here. And tooth is what, that was a word that we came up with in a few lessons ago when we talked about texture of paper itself. Okay, well that's it for this lesson on vocabulary and how to use charcoal. There'll be more in this lesson, YouTubes on the exercise in this lesson as well as the project 3.